Alexander Whitmore, a billionaire CEO who judges people by their achievements, often grabs lunch at a trendy cafe where Emma Collins, a bright barista and student, struggles to pay her college tuition. Alexander never notices her until one day he sees her counting pennies and choosing a philosophy book over lunch. Intrigued, he starts observing her. He discovers she often skips meals to buy books, study materials, or to volunteer at a community literacy program in a struggling neighborhood. Alexander is captivated by Emma's sacrifice and passion for knowledge, seeing in her someone who values education for reasons far different than his own. But before we reveal what happens next, if you also get moved by stories like this, click to subscribe now and help us bring more tales of courage and loyalty. Thank you. And now let's see what happened. The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains of her small apartment in Brooklyn, gently illuminating the wedding dress hanging in the closet like a promise of happiness. Rafaela Silva stared at her reflection in the oval mirror she'd inherited from her grandmother, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the pearl necklace, another heirloom, the only thing of real value she owned besides her dreams. At 28, Rafaela had built a modest but dignified life as a kindergarten teacher at a public school in Park Slope. Her salary barely covered the expenses of the one-bedroom apartment she shared with her cousin, but she found wealth in the smiles of the children and the certainty that she was making a difference. Orphaned at 15, she'd learned early on that happiness didn't come from material possessions, but from the bonds we create and the love we share. Lucas had come into her life 3 years earlier, a middle-class accountant who promised stability and companionship. He wasn't the Prince Charming of her childhood dreams, but he was reliable, affectionate in his own way, and offered something she'd always wanted: a family. The proposal had been simple, without grand romantic gestures, but practical, just as Lucas had always been. In recent days, however, a strange restlessness had settled in her chest, a whispering voice that questioned whether this was really the life she wanted, whether this serene love was enough to fill the emptiness she sometimes felt when she looked to the future. She tried to silence these thoughts, attributing them to pre-wedding jitters. Across town, high in a skyscraper in Manhattan's financial district, Enzo Castellani finished adjusting his Italian silk tie in front of a mirror that was worth more than Rafaela's entire apartment. At 37, he had built an empire that stretched from technology to finance, making him one of the most powerful men in New York City. His penthouse offered a panoramic view of the city, but at that moment, not even the beauty of Central Park could calm the storm raging in his chest. Enzo had met Rafaela 4 years earlier at Lucas's birthday party. She'd arrived late, apologizing with a shy smile that lit up the whole room. She was wearing a simple dress as yellow as a sunflower and carrying a homemade cake that she'd made especially for the occasion. In that instant, something irreversibly changed inside him. He had tried to resist, to pull away, even to discourage Lucas's relationship with her, inventing excuses about social differences, but each casual encounter, each conversation during gatherings with friends, each burst of her crystalline laughter plunged him deeper into that forbidden passion. Rafaela was everything he didn't know he was looking for: genuine, courageous, able to find beauty in the simplest things. As he drove to the church in his BMW, Enzo fought against the pain that had consumed him for months. Lucas had asked him to be his best man, an honor that had become a torture. How could he stand there beside the altar, watching the woman he secretly loved promise herself eternally to another man? How to smile and feign happiness when every fiber of his being screamed against that injustice? St. Patrick's Cathedral was majestic that Saturday morning, decorated with arrangements of white lilies and satin ribbons. The guests, a curious mix between Rafaela's simple family and Lucas's more affluent acquaintances, occupied the centuries-old wooden pews, whispering expectations about the ceremony. Enzo took his place beside Lucas at the altar, his impeccable dark suit contrasting with the paleness of his face. He forced a smile when his friend squeezed his shoulder, thanking him once again for being there. If only Lucas knew the sacrifice that presence represented. The music began, and Rafaela appeared at the beginning of the central aisle, a spectacle of grace and beauty in the dress she had embroidered herself during sleepless nights. Each step echoed like a hammer in Enzo's heart. She was radiant, but when their eyes met for a brief second, he caught something indefinable, a shadow of doubt, a flicker of uncertainty that made his pulse race. Rafaela walked slowly, the bouquet of white roses trembling in her hands. With each step, the unease grew in her chest like a tide. Something was wrong, not with the ceremony, not with the guests, but with herself. When her eyes met Enzo's, she felt an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. There was something in that look, an intensity, a pain that confused and disturbed her. Reaching the altar, she stood beside Lucas, who smiled at her with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her choices. The priest began the ceremony with words about eternal love and sacred commitment, but Rafaela could barely concentrate. Her heart was beating erratically, and an inner voice screamed that this was wrong, that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. When the moment came for the vows, the priest looked at her expectantly. "Rafaela Silva, do you take Lucas Mendes to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" The silence that followed seemed eternal. Rafaela looked at Lucas, at the guests, at Enzo, whose eyes reflected a pain that she didn't understand, but that somehow echoed in her own soul. With a voice that began as a whisper and strengthened with a courage she didn't know she possessed, she uttered the words that would change everything. I can't do this." The echo of Rafaela's words reverberated through the church like thunder on a sunny day. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the nervous rustling of dresses and the shocked whispers of the guests. Lucas remained motionless for a moment, his face turning from white to red, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you say?" His voice came out hoarse, trembling. "Rafaela, you could be serious." She took a step back, the bouquet slipping from her hands and falling onto the marble floor with a dull thud. "I'm so sorry, Lucas, I truly am, but I can't. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." The chaos erupted instantly. Lucas's mother rose from the front pew, her face contorted with indignation. "What nonsense is this? How dare you humiliate my son like this?" Rafaela's family, embarrassed and confused, tried to hide in the back pews, while Lucas's friends began to whisper furiously among themselves. Enzo watched everything as if he were in a dream. His mind struggled to process what had just happened. Rafaela had done exactly what a secret part of him had always hoped she would do, but he had never dared to imagine it would actually happen. The pounding in his chest was a confusing mix of shock, hope, and a deep concern for her. Lucas tried to approach Rafaela, his eyes pleading. "Honey, it's just wedding jitters. Let's talk. We can work this out. You love me. I know you love me." "I do love you, Lucas," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But not the way you deserve, not the way a husband should be loved." That's when Enzo acted. Without thinking about the consequences, without calculating the risks, he moved. In 3 long strides, he was beside Rafaela, positioning himself between her and the chaos that was forming around them. His imposing presence caused the voices to quiet down momentarily. "Enough," he said, his deep, firm voice echoing through the church. "All of you stop. She's made a courageous decision, and you should respect it." Lucas looked at his friend with eyes full of betrayal. "Enzo? You're defending this? She's humiliating me in front of everyone." "She's being honest," Enzo replied, without taking his eyes off Lucas, but acutely aware of Rafaela's nearness behind him. "Something you both should have been a long time ago." The comment was like a slap in the face. Lucas recoiled, his face contorting with pain and anger. "How dare you? I trusted you. I asked you to be my best man, and now I'm fulfilling my role of protecting what's right," Enzo interrupted, finally turning to look at Rafaela. When their eyes met, he saw in them a whirlwind of emotions: gratitude, confusion, fear, and something else that made his chest tighten. "Rafaela, you need to get out of here." She nodded, unable to speak, her body trembling with the adrenaline of the decision she had just made. Enzo took off his suit jacket and placed it over her shoulders, a simple but intimate gesture that did not go unnoticed by those present. The fabric still carried the warmth of his body and a sophisticated masculine scent that enveloped her like a protective embrace. "My car is out front," he murmured, his voice low, just for her. "I'll take you home." As they walked down the central aisle, the whispers of the guests followed them like a sinister soundtrack. Rafaela could hear fragments of the conversations. "What a scandal. Always knew she was no good. Look at the way he's defending her. I bet there's something between them." Outside the church, the cool New York air hit Rafaela's face like a slap of reality. She stopped abruptly on the steps, her legs weakening. "My God, what have I done? What have I done?" Enzo turned to her, and for the first time allowed all the emotion he felt to show in his eyes. "You did the right thing." "No, I didn't." The tears came in full force now. "I humiliated Lucas. I destroyed our friendship. I created a scandal. And why? Because of some stupid feeling that something was wrong. Sometimes feelings are wiser than reason," he said, taking a step closer. He was dangerously close now, close enough for her to see the golden nuances in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the intensity that always emanated from him. "Why did you defend me in there?" The question came out as a whisper. "Why did you risk your friendship with Lucas for me?" Enzo hesitated, and in that moment of silence, the world seemed to stop. He could lie, make up an excuse about doing the right thing, about justice and morality. But looking at her, vulnerable, courageous, beautiful even with her mascara smudged, he almost told the truth, almost. "Because you deserve to be happy," he said finally, "and I couldn't stand by and watch you suffer." There was something in the way he said it, an intensity that made Rafaela's heart race in a way she couldn't explain. She had never noticed before how Enzo looked at her, how his presence changed when she was around. But now, without Lucas as a shield between them, the connection was undeniable and terrifying. "I need to go home," she said, taking a step back. "I need to process all of this." "Of course." He opened the door of his BMW for her, and as she settled into the leather seat, he closed the door with a gentleness that contrasted with his obvious strength. During the drive to Brooklyn, they barely spoke. Rafaela looked out the window, watching the city pass by as she tried to understand what had happened. Not just in the church, but that moment on the steps. There was something between them, something she had never noticed or allowed herself to notice, and it frightened her deeply. When they arrived at the modest building where she lived, Enzo insisted on accompanying her to her apartment. "Just to make sure you're okay," he explained. And thus, the old, noisy elevator, the tension between them was almost palpable. Raffaella was painfully aware of his every move, of the way his cologne filled the small space, of how he watched her with a concern that went beyond simple friendship. At the apartment door, she turned to thank him and return his jacket. When their fingers touched as they made the exchange, an electric current ran through both of them. Enzo didn't release the fabric immediately, and for a terrifying and exciting moment, they stood there, connected by that simple touch, looking at each other as if they were seeing each other for the first time. Raffaella. His voice was husky, laden with something she couldn't name. The sound of footsteps in the hallway abruptly separated them. Raffaella pulled the jacket back and recoiled, her cheeks flushed. "Thank you," she murmured, "for everything." Enzo nodded, visibly struggling to regain his composure. "If you need anything at all." Before he could finish the sentence, Raffaella's phone rang inside the apartment. It was Lucas. She could see the name on the screen through the half-open door, and Enzo saw it too. The reality of the situation, what she had done, what it meant for all of them, fell upon both of them like a bucket of cold water. "You should answer it," Enzo said, but there was something in his voice that suggested exactly the opposite. Raffaella looked at the phone, then at him. The call stopped, but they knew there would be others, many others. Lucas wouldn't give up easily. The families would demand explanations, and New York society loved a good scandal. "This isn't going to end here, is it?" she asked. "No," he answered honestly. "It's just beginning." And then, as if fate wanted to prove him right, Enzo's phone rang. It was Lucas, and this time he answered. "Enzo, we need to talk. Now. You have a lot to explain to me." 3 days had passed since the scandal at the church, and Raffaella hadn't left her apartment. The phone rang incessantly. Local reporters had gotten wind of the story. Curious friends wanted details, and Lucas called every hour, alternating between desperate pleas and furious accusations. She had unplugged the phone the night before, unable to endure another "How could you do this to me?" The refrigerator was empty, the curtains remained drawn, and Raffaella was living on saltine crackers she'd found in the back of the pantry. Her cousin Camilla had tried to visit her, but she'd pretended not to be home. She wasn't ready to face the world, much less to explain something she didn't completely understand herself. The doorbell rang for the 10th time that day. Raffaella buried her head in the pillow, determined to ignore another intruder. But then she heard a familiar voice through the door. "Raffaella, it's me, Enzo. I know you're in there." She slowly rose from the sofa, her heart racing. She hadn't spoken to him since that strange and charged moment in the hallway of the building. She approached the door, but hesitated with her hand on the knob. "Please." His voice came lower, almost a whisper. "Lucas told me you're not answering." "Anyone? I'm worried." She opened the door just a crack, enough to see him through the security chain. Enzo looked different, less impeccable than usual. His hair slightly disheveled, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well in recent days either. "What do you want?" Her voice came out harsher than she intended. "To talk to you about what Lucas told me, and—" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "To bring you food. I know you haven't gone out to buy anything." Despite herself, Raffaella felt her stomach rumble at the word food. She looked at him through the crack. She could see grocery bags in his hands. The kindness of that gesture, after everything that had happened, broke her resistance. She took off the chain and opened the door completely. Enzo entered slowly, as if he were dealing with an injured animal. His eyes scanned the small but cozy apartment, the bookshelf full of books, the plants that Raffaella cared for with affection, the photos of the family she had lost. There was an intimacy in that space that contrasted brutally with the modern coldness of his penthouse. "Lucas said you accused him of lying about something," Raffaella said, closing the door behind him, "that you said he knew I shouldn't marry him." So Enzo placed the bags on the counter of the small kitchen, avoiding looking at her directly. Not exactly that. Then what? He began to take the items out of the bags. Fresh fruits, breads, cheeses, simple but quality things. I told him that any idiot with half an eye could see that you haven't been happy in recent months, that he was so obsessed with the idea of the perfect wedding that he stopped paying attention to you. Rafaela approached, helping him to organize the groceries, and he got angry. He got furious. Enzo finally looked at her, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He said I had no right to comment on his relationship, that I've always been jealous because I can never keep anyone around for more than a few months. The words hung in the air between them, laden with a tension that Rafaela didn't know how to interpret. She took an apple from the counter, just to have something to do with her hands. Is it true, she asked, about you not being able to maintain relationships? Enzo laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Lucas doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks that because I don't marry the daughters of my father's friends, it means I can't commit. And can you? The question came out before she could censor herself. Enzo stopped organizing the products and looked at her intensely. There was something in his eyes that she recognized, the same vulnerability she had seen on the church steps. It depends, he said slowly, on being with the right person. The air between them thickened again. Rafaela looked away, concentrating on peeling the apple with excessive care. Lucas was also angry because you defended me. Yes. Why? She raised her eyes to him. Why did you defend me? Really, this time? Enzo leaned against the counter, his hands clenched into fists. For a long moment he just watched her, as if he were making a difficult decision. Because I've seen what happens when someone marries the wrong person, he said finally. My parents married for social convenience. My mother was beautiful, well-born, the perfect wife for an ambitious businessman. My father offered financial stability and status. They convinced themselves that that was enough. Rafaela stopped peeling the apple, captivated by the pain that tinged his voice. I spent my childhood watching two strangers share a house, Enzo continued. They were polite to each other, fulfilled their social roles, appeared to be the perfect couple. But at night, when they thought I was sleeping, I heard my mother crying in her room. And my father found solace elsewhere. Enzo. She died when I was 16, cancer. In her last days, delirious with morphine, she told me that she had regretted all the choices she made, that she should have been brave enough to look for true love, even if it meant being judged by society. Rafaela felt tears stinging her eyes. She had never imagined that behind Enzo's powerful and controlled facade, there was so much pain. Was that why you never got married? For fear of repeating the pattern? He nodded slowly. I swore to myself that I would only get married if I found something real, something worth fighting the whole world for if necessary. His words floated between them, loaded with a meaning that Rafaela didn't dare to interpret completely. But there was something in the way he looked at her, an intensity that made her suspect that this story wasn't just about his parents. And Lucas? She asked. Does he know about this? Lucas knows the facts. My mother's death, my parents' silent divorce after that. But he never understood the impact it had on me. For him, marriage is about compatibility, about building a stable life together. He doesn't understand the need for passion. The word passion hung in the air between them like a confession. Rafaela swallowed hard, aware that they were treading on dangerous territory. And you think Lucas and I didn't have that? Enzo took a step closer, and she could feel the heat emanating from him. Rafaela, in the last 4 years, I've seen you together hundreds of times. I've seen how you talked, how you touched, how you looked at each other, and never, not once, Did I see fire between you?" "Maybe not everyone needs fire," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew she was lying. "You do." His voice was husky now, laden with a certainty that made her tremble. "I see it in your eyes, the way you look at the horizon when you think no one is watching, as if you're searching for something you haven't found yet." Rafaela took a step back, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You don't know me that well, don't I?" Enzo took another step towards her. "Then tell me why you really called off the wedding. The truth. It wasn't just nerves or a strange feeling. It was something more, wasn't it?" She opened her mouth to deny it, but the words died in her throat. Because he was right, and somehow, frighteningly, inexplicably, he knew it. At that moment, her cell phone vibrated on the coffee table, a text message from an unknown number. Rafaela moved away from Enzo to read it, grateful for the distraction, but when she saw the words on the screen, the blood ran cold in her veins. "I know what you two are up to, and I know things about Enzo Castellani's past that would make any sensible woman run. Meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the Plaza Hotel Palm Court, or everyone will know the truth." Rafaela stood at the entrance of the Plaza Hotel Palm Court, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the activity of Midtown Manhattan. The historic hotel teemed with tourists and New Yorkers, the buzz of conversations mingling with the clinking of China teacups. She had arrived 15 minutes early, part of a strategy that Enzo had suggested. "I need to go with you," he had insisted the night before, after she had shown him the threatening message. "Whoever this person is, she clearly knows about both of us. I'm not going to let you face this alone. There isn't a both of us," Rafaela had protested, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Now, seeing Enzo approach along Fifth Avenue, elegant even in casual clothes, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had insisted on arriving separately, so as not to arouse suspicion, but their eyes met through the glass of the Palm Court, and the connection was instantaneous and unsettling. Inside the Palm Court, Rafaela chose a table in the back, from where she could observe the entire entrance. Enzo sat down 3 tables ahead, pretending to read a newspaper, but she knew he was attentive to every movement around him. At 3:00 sharp, an elegant middle-aged woman approached Rafaela's table. Perfectly styled blonde hair, discreet but expensive jewelry, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rafaela recognized her immediately. Viviane Mendonça, Lucas's mother. "Rafaela," Viviane said, sitting down uninvited. "I'm glad you came." "Was it you?" Rafaela struggled to keep her voice controlled. "Did you send that message?" "Darling," Viviane sighed, taking an envelope from inside her Chanel bag. "You've always been a sweet girl, but naive. Obviously, someone needs to protect you from yourself." Out of the corner of her eye, Rafaela saw Enzo tense in his chair, but he remained where he was, following the plan they had devised. "What do you want?" Rafaela asked directly. "I want you to go back to my son and marry him, as you should have done from the beginning. And I want you to stay away from Enzo Castellani before it's too late." Viviane opened the envelope and spread some photographs on the table. Rafaela felt the air escape her lungs. They were photos of Enzo entering and leaving various hotels over the years, always accompanied by different women. Beautiful, sophisticated women, clearly of his social class. "My dear Enzo has a well-established pattern," Viviane said with false compassion. 3 to 6 months with each one. It always ends when they start talking about serious commitment. There are rumors that he pays some to maintain discretion about certain preferences of his. Rafaela looked at the photos, feeling nausea rise in her throat. One of the women looked vaguely like her, dark hair, delicate, much younger than Enzo. "Do you see the pattern?" Viviane continued, her voice dripping with venom, disguised as maternal concern. "You're exactly his type, the poor, naive teacher who needs to be saved. How long do you think it will take him to get tired? Why are you doing this?" Raffaella whispered. "Because I've known Enzo for 15 years. I know his family, his secrets, his peculiarities, and because my son truly loves you, not like a temporary toy." Viviane leaned forward, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "There are things about Enzo's past that not even Lucas knows. Things about how his mother really died, about the dirty deals that built the Castellani Empire, about the reasons why he can never afford to have a wife who asks questions." At that moment, a shadow fell over the table. Enzo stood there, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Viviane," he said, his voice dangerously low. "What a surprise. A rather unpleasant one." "Enzo, darling." Viviane stood up, instantly transforming her expression into a social smile. "What a coincidence to find you here." "Coincidence?" He repeated the word as if it were an insult. "May I suggest you remove your photographs from the table and leave? Actually, we were having a very interesting conversation about relationships and compatibility," Viviane replied, not intimidated. "Raffaella was curious about your dating history." Enzo looked at the photos scattered on the table, and Raffaella saw something break in his eyes. Not anger, but a deep and familiar pain. "I see," he said slowly. "And what else did you tell her?" "Just some truths that she deserves to know before making another mistake." It was then that Enzo did something unexpected. Instead of denying or defending himself, he sat down in the chair next to Raffaella, took her hand under the table, and looked her directly in the eyes. "It's true," he said, loud enough for Viviane to hear. "About the women, about the relationships that didn't last. All true." Raffaella felt her heart sink, but before she could pull her hand away, Enzo squeezed it firmly. "But there's one thing Viviane didn't tell you," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "The reason why it never worked with any of them." "Enzo," Viviane warned, clearly concerned about the direction of the conversation. "The reason," he said, completely ignoring the older woman, "is that 4 years ago, I met someone who changed everything. Someone who made me realize I was looking for love in the wrong place, with the wrong people, because the right person was right in front of me, engaged to my best friend." The cafe around them seemed to have disappeared. Raffaella could feel her pulse quickening, aware only of the warmth of Enzo's hand enveloping hers and the intensity in his eyes. "For 4 years," he continued, his voice husky with emotion, "I convinced myself I could live with it, that I could just be your friend, pretend I didn't feel what I felt, root for your happiness even if it killed me inside. And then, last Saturday, you had the courage to do what I never had. Stop a lie before it destroyed lives." "This is ridiculous," Viviane interrupted, but there was panic in her voice. "Enzo, you can't be serious." "I'm more serious than I've ever been in my life," he replied, finally looking at Viviane. "And if you or anyone else tries to use the past against me or against Raffaella, you'll find out exactly why the Castellani family has managed to build and maintain an empire for 3 generations." The threat was veiled, but clear. Viviane paled, quickly gathering the photos from the table. "You'll regret this," she said, her social composure finally cracking. "Lucas won't forgive, society won't accept it, and when Enzo gets tired of playing savior, Raffaella, you'll be alone and humiliated." She left hastily, leaving only the echo of her heels on the marble floor. Raffaella and Enzo remained silent for a long moment, their hands still intertwined under the table. Finally, she found the courage to speak. "Were you serious? About 4 years ago?" Instead of answering with words, Enzo raised his free hand and gently touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "I fell in love with you the first day I saw you," he confessed, "and every day since then has only gotten worse." Raffaella closed her eyes, letting herself get lost in that touch, in that confession that changed everything. When she opened them, again she saw that he was closer, so close that she could feel his breath. "Enzo," she whispered, and it wasn't a protest. He leaned in even further, and when their lips touched, it was as if the whole world caught fire. It wasn't a soft or hesitant kiss. It was 4 years of repressed desire, of pain and need finally released. Rafaela leaned into him, her free hand tangling in the lapel of his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Rafaela could feel the curious glances of the other patrons of the cafe, but she couldn't care. "We just gave Viviane exactly what she wanted," she whispered. "Proof that there's something between us." "I don't care," Enzo replied, his forehead resting against hers. "I don't care about Viviane, about Lucas, about any of them. The only thing I care about is you." But even as he spoke those words, both knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Viviane Mendonça had connections throughout the city, influence in the press, and now she had a powerful weapon against them. More than that, they had publicly admitted what they felt for each other, turning suspicions into facts. Enzo's phone vibrated, a message from Lucas. "I need to talk to both of you, now. My mother told me everything." Rafaela saw the message and felt a chill run down her spine. They had found the love they had always been looking for, but in doing so, they had declared war on a world that would not forgive them easily. "What do we do now?" she asked. Enzo kissed her forehead softly. "Now we face the consequences. Together." Lucas's mansion in the Hamptons was silent when Enzo and Rafaela arrived, an hour after receiving his message. The butler led them to the study, where Lucas was waiting for them, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. On the mahogany desk, copies of 3 different newspapers displayed sensational headlines. Tycoon steals best friend's bride, the altar scandal, forbidden love in high society, Castellani and the teacher, romance or opportunism. "My mother works fast," Lucas said, without lifting his eyes from the newspapers. 2 hours after your kiss at the Plaza Hotel Palm Court, half of New York already knew the story. Rafaela felt nausea rise in her throat as she saw her own picture. On the front page, an old image from a school charity event where she worked, now used to illustrate the ambitious teacher who conquered a billionaire. "Lucas, you need to understand that it wasn't planned," Enzo began, but his friend raised his hand, interrupting him. "It wasn't planned." Lucas's voice was laden with bitterness. 4 years, Enzo. 4 years you watch me date her, plan a future, choose a ring, and at no point did you have the decency to tell me you were in love with my fiancée. "How could I?" Enzo exploded, his composure finally cracking. "How could I destroy your happiness because of my feelings? You seemed good together." "Seemed." Lucas stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Or did you want to believe we seemed good so you wouldn't feel guilty for coveting your best friend's woman?" The silence that followed was deafening. Rafaela looked between the two men, watching a friendship of decades shatter before her eyes. "And you?" Lucas turned to her, his eyes glistening with pain. "You always knew, didn't you? That's why the hesitation in recent months, the strange questions about whether I really loved you. You were already falling for him." "No," Rafaela whispered, but the denial sounded weak even to her. "I didn't know that we... Lies!" Lucas slammed his fist on the table. "You both deceived me for months. You made me an idiot while you looked at each other over my head." Enzo stepped forward, instinctively protecting Rafaela. "Enough, Lucas. You can be mad at me, but not at her. Rafaela has always been loyal to you. If there's anyone to blame, here it's me." "How noble," Lucas laughed, but the sound was devoid of humor. "The great Enzo Castellani taking the blame, but you have no idea what you've unleashed, do you?" He picked up a folder that was on the table and threw the contents on the floor between them. Photos, documents, newspaper clippings, everything about the Castellani family scattered across the Persian rug. My mother wasn't bluffing about knowing your secrets, Enzo. She's spent the last 2 days collecting information, and she's discovered some interesting things. Raffaella bent down to examine the papers. There were documents about archived police investigations, suspicious bank transfers, photos of meetings with politicians known for corruption. But what made her freeze was an altered death certificate, Enzo's mother's. Your mother didn't die of cancer, did she? Lucas said, watching Enzo's reaction. She committed suicide with an overdose of sleeping pills, and your father bribed whoever. He needed to keep it a secret. Enzo turned livid, every muscle in his face contracting. How dare you? The truth hurts, doesn't it? Lucas continued, relentless. And there's more. The money laundering investigations that were mysteriously shelved when you were 25. The government contracts your company one after generous. Donations to political campaigns. The condo in Miami you bought for a federal judge's daughter. Stop, Enzo said, his voice low and dangerous. Why? Now that you've destroyed my life, can't I destroy yours? Can't I show Raffaella exactly who she's getting involved with? Raffaella looked at Enzo, searching for a denial, for any sign that all of this was a lie. But she saw only confirmation in his eyes, and something else. Fear. Is it true? She whispered. Enzo ran his hands through his hair, defeated. Some of it, yes. My mother's suicide. Yes. She couldn't stand living a lie any longer. And my father. He closed his eyes. My father did questionable things to build the empire. I inherited the consequences of those choices. And perpetuated some of them, Lucas added cruelly. Enough to survive in a world where men like your father make the rules, Enzo retorted, recovering some of his composure. I'm not a saint, Lucas. I never pretended to be. Lucas approached Raffaella, who was still kneeling among the scattered documents. You see, this is the man you destroyed our wedding for. A man whose money is stained with blood, whose entire family is built on lies and corruption. And what's your point? Enzo asked coldly. My point, Lucas said, returning behind the desk, is that you have 24 hours to undo this scandal. Enzo, you're going to make a public statement saying it was a misunderstanding, that you were just comforting a woman in crisis. Raffaella, you're going to come to me, cry, beg for forgiveness, and we're going to reschedule the wedding. Never. Raffaella stood up, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. Then, Lucas flashed a cruel smile. Tomorrow morning, all these documents will be on the desks of every journalist in New York. And not just about Enzo. I've discovered some interesting things about you too, dear Raffaella. He picked up one, last folder from the drawer. Like the fact that you're not as orphaned as you like to claim. Your father is alive, serving time for manslaughter at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. You changed your name when you came to New York. Raffaella Silva was Raffaella Santos until she was 18. Raffaella's world collapsed. This was the one truth she had kept from everyone, including Lucas, the one secret that deeply shamed her. How did you? She began, but her voice failed. Private investigators are wonderful, don't you think? Especially when well paid. I wonder what the parents of your students will think when they find out that the teacher who took care of their children is the daughter of a murderer. Enzo moved so quickly that Raffaella barely saw him. In seconds, he had Lucas pressed against the wall, his hands on the collar of his shirt. You can destroy me, Enzo said, his voice deadly, but if you touch Raffaella, if you hurt her in any way, I guarantee you'll find out exactly how far the Castellani family's influence really reaches. Get off me, Lucas gasped, but there was real fear in his eyes now. Enzo released him with a shove. Raffaella, let's go. Where to? She asked, her voice broken. He's right. If this information leaks, I lose my job, my reputation, everything. I'll protect you. How? Tears were running freely down her face now. You just admitted that your own life is built on secrets. How can you protect me when you can't even protect yourself? It was Lucas who was smiling now, savoring the victory. 24 hours, he repeated, or all your secrets become headlines. Tomorrow. Outside the mansion, Enzo and Raffaella sat in the car in silence for long minutes. Finally, she spoke. My father killed my mother, she said simply, in a fit of jealousy. I was 15 years old. I changed my name, invented the story of being an orphan. I rebuilt my entire life to escape that reality. Enzo took her hand, and I built an empire on my father's crimes and my own sins. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Despite everything, Raffaella managed a weak smile. What do we do now? Now, Enzo said, starting the car. We do what we should have done from the beginning. We fight. But as they drove away from the mansion, both knew that the fight would be more difficult than they imagined. Lucas wasn't bluffing, and they had less than a day to find a way to protect their secrets without sacrificing the love they had just discovered. In the back seat of the car, Enzo's phone vibrated. A message from Viviane. I hope you enjoyed the appetizer. The main course will be served tomorrow, unless you're sensible. All of New York is watching. The war had officially begun. Morning arrived like a devastating hurricane. At 6 in the morning, Raffaella's phone rang incessantly. Reporters, the school principal, curious neighbors. But it was the call from her cousin Camilla that made her understand the true dimension of the disaster. Rafa, have you seen the newspapers? It's on every TV channel. With trembling hands, Raffaella turned on the TV. Her photo occupied half the screen of the morning show, next to an old photo of her father being arrested. The red headline screamed, Teacher's Deadly Secret. Killer's daughter deceives New York society for years. We discovered that Raffaella Silva, 28, is actually Raffaella Santos, daughter of João Santos, convicted of manslaughter after killing his wife in 2010. The teacher changed her name and forged documents to get a job at an elite school. Her cell phone vibrated. A message from the principal. Emergency meeting, 8 a.m. Come prepared to explain yourself. Across town, Enzo had been in his office since 5 in the morning, watching his empire being questioned live on television. 3 federal investigations had been reactivated overnight. His secretary entered pale, carrying a stack of newspapers. Mr. Castellani, there's more. The district attorney is in the reception area, and... She hesitated. The company board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Enzo looked at the headlines. Castellani Empire, Blood and Corruption. How Dirty Money Built a Tycoon. Covered Up Suicide. The Truth About Marina Castellani. His phone rang. Raffaella. Enzo. They know everything. My principal. The parents. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose everything. Where are you? At home. There are reporters at the door. I can't get out. I'm coming to get you. No! Her voice was desperate. You can't be seen with me now. It'll make everything worse. But Enzo had already hung up. When he arrived at Raffaella's building, a crowd of reporters and onlookers was gathered at the entrance. He had to use the service entrance and climb 20 flights of stairs to avoid them. He found her sitting on the floor of her living room, still in her pajamas, crying as she looked at a resignation letter she had just received by email. Effective immediately, she whispered when he knelt beside her. 15 years building. My career, and it's over in one morning. Enzo pulled her into his arms, but she pulled away. No, she said, her voice broken. You can't touch me. You can't be here. They're photographing everything. I don't care about the photographs. But I do. She stood up abruptly. Enzo, you don't understand. They're painting me as a liar. an opportunist who invented an entire life to infiltrate society. And now, being with you, it just confirms their narrative. The poor teacher who seduced the billionaire. Enzo's phone rang. His lawyer. Enzo, I need you to come down here now. The DA wants to question you about the 2018 operations. And there's more. The FBI just got a search warrant for the company offices. He hung up and looked at Rafaela, who had heard everything. They're going to arrest you? She asked, her voice almost inaudible. Maybe, probably. Rafaela closed her eyes, tears streaming silently. This is my fault. If I hadn't called off the wedding, if I had stayed with... Lucas, don't say that. It's true. She turned to him, her eyes shining with pain. I destroyed your life, Enzo. I destroyed your friendship, your reputation, your company, all because I was too cowardly to marry a good man who loved me. Lucas didn't love you. He possessed you. What's the difference? At least with him, I was respected. Now I'm just the killer's daughter who seduced the corrupt tycoon. The words cut Enzo more deeply than any newspaper headline. Is that what you really think? That I'm just a criminal who took advantage of you? Rafaela hesitated, and in that hesitation he saw his answer. The doubt she struggled to hide, the fear that maybe Lucas and Viviane were right about him. I don't know what to think anymore, she whispered. Enzo, I don't know who you really are anymore. I don't know who I really am. Everything we've built, our love, it was based on lies. My feelings for you were never a lie. But your life is, your fortune is, your reputation is. She moved further away from him. And now mine is too. Her phone rang. It was Camilla, hysterical. Rafa, you need to see this, now. Rafaela turned on the television again. Lucas was at a press conference, impeccable in his navy blue suit, his eyes red as if he had been crying. I want everyone to know that I forgive Rafaela, he was saying, his voice choked with practiced emotion. She was manipulated by a powerful and unscrupulous man. Enzo Castellani took advantage of her vulnerability, of her lower social standing, to satisfy his own desires. The crowd of reporters murmured, clearly moved by the performance. Rafaela has always been an honest, hard-working woman. Yes, she hid her past, but who among us wouldn't do the same to escape a family tragedy? I still love her, and my offer of marriage stands. I can protect her from this scandal, give her the respect and stability she deserves. Rafaela turned. Off the television, her face as pale as paper. He's offering me a way out, she said, more to herself than to Enzo. A prison, you mean? A life. She looked at him, and he saw the determination forming in her eyes. Enzo, look around. Look at what we are together. Scandal, destruction, chaos. Maybe I should accept his offer. No. The word came out like a roar. Rafaela, don't do it. Not because of this, not because of them. Why not? The tears were back, but now there was something broken in her voice. Give me a reason. A good reason why we should continue destroying each other's lives. Enzo approached, desperate. Because I love you, because you love me, because what we have is real. Love isn't enough, she shouted, her composure finally shattering. Love doesn't pay the bills, doesn't rebuild reputations, doesn't erase the past. Look at us, Enzo. Look at what we've become. His cell phone rang again. This time it was his secretary. Mr. Castellani, the FBI has arrived. They have a warrant for your arrest. The silence that followed was devastating. Enzo looked at Rafaela, seeing the final decision forming in her eyes. Go, she whispered. Go and don't come back. Rafaela, please. Her voice was broken, defeated. If you truly love me, go. Let me try to save what I can still save of my life. Enzo stood there for a moment that felt like an eternity, memorizing every detail of her face, knowing that it might be the last time he saw her. Then, without another word, he turned and left. Outside, the flashes of photographers exploded as he emerged from the building. The questions rained down like bullets. Enzo! Is it true that you manipulated Raffaella? Are you going to turn yourself into the police? What do you say about the accusations of corruption? He got into the car without answering, but when he looked up, he saw Raffaella at the apartment window, watching him leave. Even from afar, he could see that she was crying. 3 hours later, the images of Enzo being handcuffed were on every channel. That same afternoon, Raffaella called Lucas. "I accept," she said, her voice empty of emotion. "I accept your proposal. Let's reschedule the wedding." On the other end of the line, Lucas smiled in triumph. "I knew you'd see reason, my love. We'll announce it today. In 6 months, all this madness will be forgotten." But as Lucas spoke about wedding plans and honeymoons, Raffaella looked at the television, where they were showing images of Enzo being led away by the police. She had chosen safety, respectability, the life that society approved. She had chosen everything except love. And for the first time in her life, Raffaella Silva felt truly lost. 2 weeks had passed since Enzo had been arrested. Raffaella was sitting in the most expensive salon on the Upper East Side, being prepared for another public appearance alongside Lucas. After the announcement of their reconciliation, they had become the poster couple for redemption, the repentant teacher, and the magnanimous fiancé who had forgiven her. "Just a little more blush, darling," said the makeup artist, "for the cameras." Raffaella watched her reflection in the mirror, but didn't recognize the woman she saw. Perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, a designer dress that cost more than her old monthly salary. Lucas had insisted on every detail of the transformation. "You need to look like you belong in my world," he had said. "No more simple clothes or loose hair. Society needs to see that you've evolved." Her phone vibrated. Another message from Camilla, who had tried to talk to her dozens of times in the last few weeks. "Rafa, please answer me. I'm worried you're not being yourself." Raffaella deleted the message without replying. Camilla didn't understand. No one understood that she had made the sensible choice, the choice that would protect her. "Ready, gorgeous," the makeup artist announced. "Your fiancé is going to love it." Fiancé. The word still sounded strange, forced. In the car, on the way to the charity event where they would appear together, Lucas reviewed the key points she should mention if questioned by the press. "Remember, you were a victim of manipulation. Enzo took advantage of your emotional vulnerability. You never truly loved him. You just confused gratitude with love. And now you're happy to be back with the one who truly loves you." Raffaella nodded mechanically, repeating the words she had memorized like a script. The event was being held at the Waldorf Astoria, a gala to raise funds for early childhood education. A cruel irony, considering Raffaella had lost her career in that field. She smiled and posed for the photos, said the right words to the reporters, behaved like the perfect fiancé Lucas wanted her to be. It was during the cocktail hour that she saw Camilla approaching, determined. "Raffaella, we need to talk," her cousin said, ignoring Lucas's disapproving look. "Camilla, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." Camilla grabbed her arm firmly. 5 minutes in the ladies' room." Before Lucas could intervene, she dragged Raffaella away from the crowd. In the luxurious hotel restroom, Camilla turned to her, her eyes shining with concern and frustration. "What happened to you? Where's the Raffaella I know?" "I'm here. I'm fine." "Fine?" Camilla laughed bitterly. "Rafa, you look like a robot. You talk like a robot. You smile like a robot. This isn't you. This is who I need to be now. Why? Because of the scandal? Because of the headlines? Camilla held Rafaela's shoulders. Since when do you care more about what other people think than about your own happiness? Rafaela pulled away, avoiding her cousin's gaze. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. Help me understand why you're marrying a man you don't love while the man you do love is in jail. I don't love Enzo. The denial came out louder than intended. It was a mistake, a confusion. Lies. Camilla crossed her arms. Rafa, I've known you since you were a child. I saw you with Lucas for 3 years, and never, not once, did I see you look at him the way you looked at Enzo that day in the church. The words hit Rafaela like a punch. She leaned against the marble sink, fighting against the tears she had been trying to suppress for weeks. It doesn't matter how I looked at him, she whispered. It doesn't matter what I felt. Enzo is a criminal. Camilla, his family is built on blood and corruption. According to whom? Lucas, his mother? Camilla frowned. Rafa, have you ever investigated these accusations on your own? I saw the documents. Documents that Lucas showed you. Documents that his mother collected. Camilla approached again. Have you considered that maybe they have reasons to lie about Enzo? Rafaela raised her eyes, meeting her cousin's determined gaze. What are you insinuating? I'm insinuating that you should investigate the truth before handing your life over to Lucas. Camilla took a business card from her pocket. Remember Fernanda, my investigative journalist friend. She's willing to help. No. Rafaela pushed the card back. I'm not going to stir this up. I've already caused enough destruction. Or, Camilla said slowly, are you afraid of what you might discover? Before Rafaela could answer, Lucas appeared at the entrance to the restroom. Sorry to intrude, ladies, but we need to get back. The auction is starting. Camilla looked between the two, the tension palpable. Of course. We wouldn't want to delay the spectacle. She left, but not before discreetly slipping the card into Rafaela's purse. The rest of the night passed like a blur. Rafaela smiled, chatted, acted like the happy fiancé everyone expected to see. But Camilla's words echoed in her mind. Have you ever investigated these accusations on your own? Back at the apartment she now shared with Lucas, he had insisted it wouldn't look right for her to live alone. She waited until he fell asleep before taking out the card Camilla had given her. Fernanda Santos, investigative journalism. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. It was 2 a.m, but Fernanda answered on the second ring. Camilla told me you might call, said the journalist without preamble. I can be there in 20 minutes. No, Lucas can't know. Can we meet tomorrow? Sure, but Rafaela, there are things you need to know about Lucas Mendez and his family. Things that will shock you. Rafaela's heart raced. What kind of things? Not over the phone. Tomorrow, Zabar's 10 a.m. And Rafaela, bring everything you have on the evidence that Lucas showed you against Enzo. The next day, Rafaela told Lucas she was going shopping with Camilla. Instead, she nervously drove to the cafe on the Upper West Side, where Fernanda was waiting. For her with a voluminous folder. Thank you for coming, Fernanda said, noticing how Rafaela nervously looked around. Relax. No one knows us here. What did you find out? Fernanda opened the folder. First, show me what Lucas presented as evidence against Enzo. Rafaela hesitated, then took out copies of the documents she had secretly saved. Fernanda examined them, a grim smile forming on her lips. I thought it would be this. She took other documents from her folder. Rafaela, half of these documents are forgeries, not very good ones, by the way. How do you know? Because I investigated the Castellani family 2 years ago for a story about successful family businesses. Enzo is clean, Rafaela, cleaner than most businessmen I know. Fernanda spread authentic documents on the table. Yes, his father did questionable things in the 80s and 90s, but Enzo has spent the last 15 years cleaning up the company, returning questionable money, breaking dubious contracts. He almost went bankrupt twice doing the right thing. Raffaella looked at the documents, the reality slowly forming. And what about his mother's suicide? True, but not for the reasons Lucas told you. Fernanda picked up an original death certificate. Marina Castellani committed suicide because she discovered she was being blackmailed. Someone threatened to expose the family's old crimes if she didn't pay an exorbitant amount. Who was blackmailing her? Fernanda hesitated. This is the hard part, Raffaella, and the reason why you need to sit down. Raffaella's heart pounded. Tell me. The law firm responsible for the blackmail was the same one where Lucas's father worked at the time, and there's evidence that Lucas himself was involved, even though he was just an intern. Raffaella's world collapsed again, but this time in a completely different way. Lucas was blackmailing Enzo's mother? There's more. Fernanda picked up another document. Enzo's arrest warrant? Based on evidence that was discovered anonymously and delivered to the district attorney. Fabricated evidence, as we discovered yesterday. How did you find out? Because the forgeries were made on the same computer that Lucas uses at the office. The printer has a specific digital signature. Raffaella stood up abruptly, nausea rising. My God, what have I done? You were manipulated by a man who orchestrated this for years. Lucas discovered that Enzo was in love with you and decided to use that to destroy him and get you back. Tears ran freely down Raffaella's face now. Enzo is in jail because of lies. And I abandoned him when he needed me most. There's still time, Fernanda said gently. I can take this evidence to the judge in charge of the case today. Enzo could be free by tomorrow. And then? Raffaella asked, her voice broken. How can I look at him knowing that I doubted him, that I abandoned him? That, Fernanda said, you'll have to figure out on your own. Raffaella looked at the documents on the table, the proof of Enzo's innocence, the evidence of Lucas's manipulation, the truth that had been hidden all along. She had a choice to make, a choice that this time would be based on truth, not fear. What do I need to do? She asked, finally finding her voice. Fernanda smiled. First, let's get an innocent man out of jail. Then you're going to fight for your love. The afternoon of the next day found Raffaella standing at the door of the law firm where Lucas worked, her hands trembling as she held the folder with all the evidence that Fernanda had gathered. She had spent the entire night rehearsing what she would say, but now, at the moment of truth, the words seemed insufficient for the magnitude of the betrayal she was about to expose. Lucas was in a meeting when she arrived, but his secretary let her wait in his office. Raffaella looked around the room she had visited so many times during their courtship. The bookshelves full of law books, the framed diplomas, the photo of the two of them on the desk that now made her feel nauseous. Everything seemed different now that she knew the truth. Raffaella! Lucas came in smiling, approaching to kiss her. What a pleasant surprise. Did you come to invite me to lunch? She pulled away from the kiss, placing the folder on the desk between them. I came to return some things you gave me. His smile faltered as he saw the seriousness in her eyes. What things? Lies, Lucas. Very well crafted lies. She opened the folder and spread the original documents on the table. Forged documents. Planted evidence. Blackmails orchestrated for years. The color drained from Lucas's face. He looked at the papers, immediately recognizing what they were, and his body stiffened. Where did you get this? The right question is, for how long have you planned to destroy Enzo? Raffaella picked up Marina Castellani's death certificate. His mother committed suicide because of blackmail that your office, that you were doing. Against the family. Rafaela, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Her voice rose, years of repressed anger finally exploding. You discovered that Enzo was in love with me and decided to use that to destroy his life. You forged documents, planted evidence, manipulated the press. To protect us, Lucas exploded, the mask finally falling. To protect our relationship. Enzo Castellani was obsessed with you, Rafaela. He would have done anything to have you. He never did anything. For 4 years, he respected our relationship. The only one who didn't respect it was you. Not me, not him, not the truth. Lucas began to pace back and forth, his hands in his hair. You don't know what you're talking about. Enzo is dangerous, Rafaela. Men like him always get what they want. Like you? She picked up another document. The evidence that led to his arrest was printed on your printer, Lucas. The police already have the technical proof. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas stopped pacing and looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the man he really was. Not the gentle and protective fiancé, but someone capable of destroying lives to get what he wanted. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and threatening. You'll regret choosing a criminal over me. The only criminal here is you. Rafaela closed the folder and headed for the door. And thanks to this evidence, Enzo will be released today. And then, Lucas shouted after her, do you think he'll forgive you? That he'll forget that you abandoned him when he needed you most? You betrayed him, Rafaela. You doubted him. You chose me. The words hit their mark, making her stop at the door. It was true. She had abandoned Enzo at the most difficult moment. How could she expect his forgiveness? Maybe you're right, she said without turning around. Maybe he won't forgive me. But at least I'll sleep knowing that I did the right thing. 3 hours later, Rafaela was at the gates of Rikers Island, waiting. Fernanda had worked quickly, presenting the evidence to the judge, who immediately revoked Enzo's detention. The press was already being notified about the twist in the case. When he finally emerged through the gates, Rafaela felt her heart stop. Enzo was thinner, paler, his eyes carrying a hardness that hadn't been there before. When he saw her waiting, he stopped abruptly, as if he had seen a ghost. They stood there for long seconds, looking at each other across the distance that seemed impassable. Finally, she found the courage to approach. Enzo, why are you here? His voice was cold, controlled. Shouldn't you be preparing for your wedding? There's no more wedding. She stopped 6 feet away from him, fighting the urge to run into his arms. I discovered the truth about Lucas, about the false evidence, about everything. Something moved in his eyes. Surprise, maybe relief, but the hardness remained. And I came to ask for your forgiveness. The tears she had held back all day finally began to fall. Enzo, forgive me for doubting you, for abandoning you, for not fighting for the truth from the beginning. He took a step closer, his eyes studying her face. You believe me now? I always believed, she whispered. Deep down, I always knew you were innocent. But I was afraid, ashamed, lost. And now? Rafaela took a deep breath, gathering all the courage she possessed. Now I know I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you. I know it might be too late, that maybe you can't forgive me, but I had to try. I had to tell you that I love you, that I've always loved you. Enzo closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were fighting an internal battle. When he opened them, the hardness had begun to melt away. Rafaela, he said, his voice husky, the last 2 weeks have been hell. Not because of the jail, not because of the accusations, but because of losing you. Because of believing that you had chosen Lucas, that you had decided that I wasn't worth fighting for. You're worth everything, she said, finally closing the distance between them. Worth any fight, any scandal, anything the world can throw at us. This time, when she touched his face, he didn't pull away. Instead, he covered her hand with his, the familiar touch awakening all the emotions they had both tried to suppress. How are we going to get through this? He asked. The scandal, the distrust, everything that happened are together, she answered simply. One day at a time, one truth at a time. Enzo pulled her into his arms then, and when they kissed, it was as if the whole world rearranged itself. It wasn't just passion or relief. It was promise, forgiveness, and the certainty that they had found something that was worth any adversity. 6 months later, St. Patrick's Cathedral was decorated again, this time with arrangements of yellow sunflowers, Raffaella's favorite flowers. The press was present, but now the headlines spoke of redemption, true love, and second chances. Raffaella walked down the aisle in the same dress she had worn at the wedding with Lucas, but now with alterations that made her feel truly herself. This time, there was no doubt, no fear, just the absolute certainty that she was walking towards her destiny. Enzo waited for her at the altar, impeccable and emotional, surrounded by true friends and the family they had chosen to build together. Camilla stood as matron of honor, radiant, and even some of Raffaella's former students were present. She had returned to teaching at a school that had hired her after the whole truth came to light. When she reached the altar and Enzo took her, "Hands," he whispered, "are you sure this time?" "I've never been so sure of anything in my life," she replied, smiling through her happy tears. The priest began the ceremony, and when it came to the vows, Raffaella looked into the eyes of the man she had almost lost and said clearly and firmly, "I do." And this time, the words carried the full weight of true love, of regained trust, and the promise that some loves are strong enough to survive any storm. The kiss that sealed the union was accompanied by the emotional applause of those present and by the flash of cameras that now captured not a scandal, but a love story that had triumphed against all odds. Outside the church, as they posed for the official photos, Enzo whispered in Raffaella's ear, "It was worth the wait. It was worth the fight," she replied, and they both knew that they had found not only love, but the bravest and truest version of themselves. The New York sun shone upon them, illuminating not only the end of a turbulent journey, but the beginning of a life built on unshakable foundations. Truth, forgiveness, and a love that had proven to be stronger than any adversity.